The night my father left was quiet, too quiet for a family breaking apart. There was no shouting, no dramatic goodbye. I was 16 then, old enough to understand silence, but too young to know how much it could hurt. My mother sat on the edge of the bed, staring at the wall, holding a small bag of clothes she never unpacked. My younger sister slept on the floor beside her, still believing that tomorrow would be normal. I stood in the doorway, listening to the sound of my father's car fade into the distance, taking our old life with it. Before that night, we were not rich, but we were together. My father worked long hours, my mother took care of the house, and we shared simple meals filled with laughter. Then slowly, things changed. My father became distant. He stopped talking during dinner. He stopped asking about school. His phone was always in his hand, and his eyes were always somewhere else. My mother noticed everything, but she said nothing. She believed patience could save a family. When he left, he did not explain. He only said, "I need freedom." Freedom was a strange word to use when leaving behind a wife and 2 children. The next morning, the truth began to sink in. The house felt empty, not because of space, but because of fear. Bills were waiting on the table. The fridge was almost empty. My mother tried to smile, but her eyes were tired. Days turned into weeks. My mother searched for work, but it was not easy. She had spent her life caring for us, not building a career. I took a part-time job after school, washing dishes at a small restaurant. My hands were always sore, but I never complained. My sister stopped asking when father would come back. Children understand pain faster than adults think. At school, I felt different. Friends talked about weekend trips and new clothes. I talked about homework and work shifts. Sometimes, I felt angry. Other times, I felt ashamed, as if my family's broken pieces were my fault. At night, I listened to my mother cry quietly, thinking we were asleep. Those moments hurt more than hunger. One winter evening, the electricity was cut off. We sat together in the dark, wrapped in blankets. My mother told us stories from her childhood, stories about strength and survival. Her voice was calm, but her hands were shaking. That night, I realized something important. We had lost a father, but we had not lost each other. Slowly, life forced us to grow. My sister became more responsible. She helped my mother and studied hard. I learned to manage money and time. My mother found work cleaning offices early in the morning. She came home tired, but proud. We celebrated small victories, like paying a bill on time or sharing a warm meal. Years passed. The pain did not disappear, but it changed. It became quieter, like an old scar. Then one afternoon, my father returned. He stood at the door, older, thinner, and uncertain. He said he had made mistakes. He said life was hard without us. My mother listened silently. I looked at him and felt something surprising. I felt nothing. He wanted forgiveness. He wanted to be part of our lives again. But families are not abandoned bags waiting to be picked up again. My mother spoke softly and said we had learned to live without him. We wished him well, but we closed the door. That night, we sat together again, just like before. There was no anger, no tears. Only peace. We were no longer the abandoned family. We were the family that survived. The day my father returned, the sky was heavy with clouds, as if it carried the weight of all the years we had lived without him. I was 24 then, no longer the frightened teenager who had watched him leave. Life had changed us in quiet, powerful ways. Our small house looked the same from the outside, but inside, every corner held memories of struggle, growth, and strength. I heard a knock on the door in the late afternoon. My mother was in the kitchen, preparing tea after a long day at work. When I opened the door, I did not recognize the man standing there at first. His hair was gray, his shoulders bent, and his eyes were filled with regret. Then he said my name, and the past rushed back like a sudden storm. He asked if he could come in. I stepped aside, not out of love, but out of curiosity. He sat on the sofa where he once watched television with us, but now he looked like a guest in a stranger's home. My sister came home shortly after. She froze when she saw him, her face turning pale. Years ago, she had cried herself to sleep missing him. Now, she felt only confusion. My father began to speak, slowly and carefully. He talked about his choices, about chasing a life that promised happiness but delivered loneliness instead. He spoke of failed jobs, broken relationships, and nights spent wishing he could turn back time. He said leaving us was the biggest mistake of his life. My mother listened without interruption. Her face showed no anger, no warmth, only calm strength. When he finished, silence filled the room. It was a silence stronger than any argument. Finally, my mother spoke. She said she had waited years for an explanation, but life had moved forward without it. She said pain had taught her lessons words never could. He asked for forgiveness. He asked if he could stay, even for a while. He said he wanted to be a father again. I looked at my sister. She avoided his eyes. The child who once needed him had grown into a woman who no longer depended on him. I spoke then, surprising even myself. I told him about the nights without food, the days without electricity, the fear we lived with after he left. I told him about my mother working before sunrise, about my sister growing up too fast. I did not shout. I did not accuse. I simply told the truth. He cried quietly. His tears felt real, but they came too late. Regret cannot erase absence. Love cannot be proven by words alone. My mother stood up and walked to the door. She told him we wished him peace, but our home was no longer his. When he left, the clouds outside began to clear. Light entered the room in a soft, gentle way. My sister sat beside my mother and held her hand. There was sadness, but also relief. The past had finally knocked on our door, and we had answered it with honesty. That evening, we talked about our journey. We remembered the hard days and the small joys that kept us going. We laughed about mistakes we made while learning to survive. We realized how strong we had become, not because of what we lost, but because of what we protected. In the weeks that followed, my father sent messages, then stopped. Life returned to its normal rhythm. I focused on my career. My sister planned her future. My mother smiled more often. The house felt lighter, as if a heavy shadow had finally left. One night, as we shared dinner, my mother said something I will never forget. She said family is not defined by who leaves or returns. It is defined by who stays, who struggles, and who loves without conditions. Looking around the table, I understood the truth of her words. We were not broken anymore. We were complete in our own way. The abandoned family had become a story of strength, and that story belonged to us alone.